It's always a good time to talk college football, especially with Steve Deace from Michigan Podcast. Please, if you have no idea what I'm talking about in regards to his work on the college football front, check it out right here on YouTube, Michigan Podcast, or on your favorite audio platform. Steve and I mix it up every Tuesday on Michigan Podcast as well, part of the 10-minute war. You got to check that out. But again, any of Steve's work concerning college football. Brother, how are we doing today?
The season is getting closer, so I am doing better, man. How are you?
I am doing well. Appreciate you stopping by. And I would invite everyone who's in the live chat, leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics for Steve and myself. We will certainly have plenty to talk about without your comments and questions, but may leave those right there. As we, of course, have had the two major polls, Steve, released here in the last week. The AP just a few days ago, the coaches the week prior. Michigan with an interesting poll history dating back to the early days of Bo Schembechler. So you had pointed out that there have been, I believe, 12 times that Michigan was unranked when the preseason poll was released, and 5 of those times had made their way to at least a 12th or better finish in the final postseason poll. The most recent of those, if I'm not mistaken, would have been Jim Harbaugh's first season in Ann Arbor, finishing out at 10-3 with a big bowl win against Florida.
Yeah, so this is the 10th time since 1968 that Michigan has not been in the AP top 25 or AP preseason poll, whether it was top 20 back then. I didn't go any further back than that. One, we didn't have a preseason polling until the 50s. And then 2, you start getting into an era where freshmen are ineligible. It's just a different era when you get past the late 60s. Pre-integration, still in a lot of parts in the South, still integrated racially. So if you go back to 1968, 2021 is the 10th time that Michigan was not ranked in the preseason AP poll. 5 of those previous 9 times, they ended the season 12th or higher. Once they ended the season number 2 in the final AP poll behind national champion Oklahoma. So now the other 4 times were the 3 seasons under Rich Rodriguez, and then he was fired, and then 2014 under Brady Hoke, and he was fired. So what that trend line kind of tells me as a Michigan fan is for a program that, in any program that has the blue blood name and fan base and tradition Michigan has, is going to get some built-in benefit of the doubt, or as other fan bases like to call it, overrated, okay? So what that tells me is when they're down on us, either they're really right or they're really wrong, right? And this kind of feeds into what I have been saying this entire offseason. I really don't think this is going to be some kind of 8-4, they made some good steps. I really don't believe that. Like, I really believe Jim Harbaugh is getting canned, which will never be official. He'll retire and get a nice check. They won't officially fire one of the greatest players in school history. They'll do what they did with Bump Elliott when they set him aside for Bo Schembechler in 1968, okay? But to me, it's either he's done or he's Big Ten Coach of the Year kind of a year. I don't think this is just going to be, it's solid, young team. I can see they made some steps. We'll see what they're doing next year. That's the way we think, from the outside intellectually. But if you look at the trend line here, and I think also the youth on this team, and the youth of the coaching plays into this too, okay? Like I think when you've got 7 new coaches, 6, but we lost one to Buffalo as a head coach, so we had to add a 7th. So 7 different coaches since last year. Then all the youth on this team. To me, this thing either like coagulates at one time and lightning strikes and they get off to a great start, win that early game against Washington and get on a roll, and they're playing Ohio State for the Big Ten East last week of the year kind of a season. Or we're going into November where you're at Penn State. You've got the sandwich game of all – actually, you've got Indiana at Penn State, then the sandwich game of all sandwich games at Maryland, and then Ohio State. And we're wondering, do you think we can get Matt Campbell or not? Okay, I think it's one of those 2 things. I really do.
As soon as you sent me that trend, I immediately went to the 1985 rankings because I thought of the team that you brought up that finished number 2 in the rankings, even though they did not win the Big Ten championship 10-1-1 because they were coming off that deplorable 6-6 campaign in which they played BYU in the Holiday Bowl in '84. So I figured that would be one of them. Bo's first season was obviously the big upset against Ohio State.
They weren't ranked that year, 1968. And Bump Elliott's last year, they were not ranked in the preseason poll. That year, they were actually number 4 in the country heading into the final against Ohio State. That was the infamous 50-14 game where Woody put the starters back in to go for 2. And when he was asked why he didn't go for 2 by Joe Falls of the Detroit Free Press back in the day, he said, because I couldn't go for 3. All right. So 68, 69, 85, and 2011. They were not in the preseason poll in Brady Hoke's first season. They finished 11-2 and 12th that year after winning the Sugar Bowl. And then you also mentioned Harbaugh's first year. You know what's funny also is they almost got the exact same place in the preseason coaches poll, 33rd, that they got in Harbaugh's first year. They were 34th. So I mean, this thing has really come full circle now under Jim Harbaugh. So he's about either to get Hokeized or he's about to remind us, you guys remember I was 6 inches from winning a damn Super Bowl once, right? It's going to be one of those two. I really don't think, Mark, you and I are sitting here and having a conversation after the Ohio State game. Well, they played tough, moral victory, 8-4, solid step. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be by about Halloween, we all know, they're moving on, or we're having a conversation at Thanksgiving if he's Big Ten Coach of the Year or not.
Steve, this is why I tend to disagree on the final win total assessment. If you were going to present to me either boom or bust, it was going to be either or. And by boom or bust, I mean like 10-2, maybe even 9-3, a really strong 9-3 that's fringe top 10 versus a 6-6 or worse, 5-7, something in that range. I would take the bust, either or. But the reason I tend to side in the middle is because of the talent on the roster. So basically, if we take 6 games out of this equation, meaning the 6 games that they played in 2020, Jim Harbaugh, though disappointing in not winning Big Ten titles, not beating their rival, is still delivering roughly top 15 teams every season. And again, the recruiting classes have not fallen off. So that should add up to a capable football team that can play top 15 to 20 football.
See, that's really the debate. If you take away 2020 because of the full body of work and come to the conclusion that it's a COVID year, and we're doing that for teams like Penn State, for example. Now it's funny on the other end, like for Indiana, we all suddenly think that the program's had a major breakthrough because we're not saying when a team that did really good last year, we're not saying throw COVID out. We're only saying that when they did really bad. All right. Here's why I'm not doing that as a Michigan fan. And by the way, I want you to be right. Okay. Brother, I'm closer to 50 than 40. Okay?
I don't know if you do because I'm in that 8-4, 7-5 range. My official pick has yet to be released, but I'm in that range. So I don't know if you want to be lost in the middle there.
No, I don't want to be lost in the middle. Okay. But I want this to be successful. This is still the favorite player of my youth. Coaching searches, there's all kinds of speculation about Matt Campbell. And, one of my little birdies spoke to a member of an Ohio State coaching staff, not football, but another sport, who follows football very closely and told me that they down in Columbus, they think he's an Urban Meyer level talent. Now, you know me, I live in Iowa. I've been very close to the Iowa State program in the past. I'm well aware of the work that Matt has done. I mean, you're talking about an Iowa State program that has only been ranked in the top 10 4 times in the entire history of the AP poll, Mark, and 3 of them are under Matt Campbell, okay? What he's done here is near Bill Snyder levels of resurrection. That being said, you're talking about a guy that has turned down multiple NFL jobs. He'll have his pick of college and NFL jobs again this offseason if they're anything close to as good as what they were last year, let alone if they're as good as their preseason ranking. It's no guarantee right now that we end up with him. You throw in the politics of Michigan. And we saw that when Lloyd stepped down, they couldn't agree on who to rally behind and everything else. And that divisive process, coaching changes are a gambit. They're a roll of the dice, man. I mean, it's hard. So I would prefer, particularly because I like several of the new hires that he's made. I like Steve Clinkscale. I like Mike Hart. I like Ron Bellamy. I like several of the hires he's made. I would prefer that this works. I just have lost all faith that it will. And here's why last season broke me. Because I really thought, last year, whether you agree or not, but, Jim went out there and marched with Black Lives Matters with his players. He was front and center went out and marched against his own school president with his players. Let us play. It really looked like he had finally figured out he had to be more of a college coach, if you know what I'm trying to say. That he really needed to be more directly involved in the lives of his players, and they had to be more than just football prospects like in the NFL. And look at it. Remember last year how Wisconsin kept having stops with COVID, even during the preseason? Michigan never did. Ohio State had stops. And Michigan. Michigan with its med school and its elitism. Dude, that they were testing guys 3 times more than anybody else was just so they can play the self-righteous card, right? And we still couldn't. Our guys followed all of the protocols. He was bonding with his players. It really looked like this was a year that culturally they were going to take advantage of this circumstance. They go out the very first week against Minnesota, who had all kinds of players that didn't follow the COVID protocols and were anemic in terms of depth. We named the score against them, and it's like, wow. And Josh Gaddis's offense actually looked like this offense is supposed to look. And then they go get punched in the mouth by Michigan State in that first half and never responded again the rest of the season. And that, to me, reminded me of 2014 when Brady Hoke went down to Notre Dame in prime time in a rivalry game, and they got punched in the mouth and they got shut out in that game, if you'll recall. And then they never responded again the rest of the year. They had the Chinese fire drill on the sidelines with Shane, I can't remember the quarterback's last name, the quarterback with the head injury. And that just kind of looked like Michigan. All of a sudden now, Michigan falls apart. We have to cancel games. We've got fleets of guys. We were going to play a third string, no star quarterback against Ohio State. The whole thing, the first sign of resistance, Mark, first sign of adversity, the whole thing just implodes and falls apart. And that is what has me spooked that this thing just can't be fixed. I hope I'm wrong, man. I hope I'm wrong. I want Jimmy to prove me wrong.
Some of your notes had me delving into Ohio State's AP poll history. And in the last 2 decades, some fan bases maybe in Tuscaloosa and Norman, Oklahoma won't be too happy with this comment, but it's uncanny how consistent this program has been under now Ryan Day, Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel.
It's even further than that. Basically since Woody Hayes had his breakthrough, what was that? 52, 54, his first national champion. Basically, ever since then, Ohio State is just 9.5 wins minimum, guaranteed, pretty much ever since then. That's.
But since 2002 in Tressel's national championship year, basically they've been ranked between 1 and 10, basically in the top 5 to 10 every year, and they've delivered top 5 to 10 every year. It's uncanny. You can just run through it. Urban Meyer's first team was ranked 18th because of the scandal and the so forth, and that turned out pretty well at 12-0. And every other team has been ranked in the top 5 to 10 in the country and delivered top 5 to 10 in the country. And then I believe you've got to go back to very early in Cooper's tenure, the last time that they were unranked preseason.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Auburn Tigers, Brian Harson's in town. He's got a difficult schedule. We think of Auburn, many college football fans, as being, near the top of the rung. They jump up and compete for national championships every 5 to 10 years, and that's been the history for the last couple of decades. 2013, 10, 04, et cetera. But it's a bit strange that you uncovered that they have not had back-to-back regular season win totals of double digits since the late 80s, 88, 89.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, Pat Dye was the coach back in those teams. You're thinking of those are the Tracy Walker teams that kind of owned the SEC in that era. That's the last time they posted double-digit regular season wins. And since the Cam Newton National Championship season, Auburn has had only one season when it did not lose at least 4 games, and that was when it nearly won the final BCS championship in 2013.
There's so much focus on the top 5, and rightfully so, and those are the programs that have seemingly separated themselves. So regardless of whether you still feel those 5 are going to fill those 5 spots to end the season, who do you think is most likely to drop off?
Within those top 5?
Yes. Not saying that you're predicting it, but if somebody does.
If before the last week and a half, I would have said Clemson or Alabama. And the reason I would have said so is because neither one of those teams has any semblance of a backup quarterback. I mean, Clemson's backup quarterbacks are in Major League Baseball right now. So they've got like a walk-on and a wide receiver. Alabama's backup quarterback is Bear Bryant's great-grandson or something. So, I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, I think I got that right. I've been practicing.
You're on it.
All right. Bryce Young, that should be simpler, right? Okay. I mean, those were, not Trevor Lawrence level recruits but they were both Tua level recruits when they signed. So I'm pretty confident, given the talent they'll have around them, that they'll be great. We saw what DJ could do last year against Notre Dame under the lights, and he didn't have a running game in that game. So it was pretty much just all him. But what happens if there's a concussion protocol with either of those guys? I mean, there's nothing behind them. So I would have said one of those 2 teams before. Now I'm not so certain it's not Georgia because they've had a fairly disastrous training camp from an injury perspective. Okay. I mean, by my count now, we're looking at 3 starters at least aren't going to play against Clemson. So if you lose that opening game, it's basically now win the SEC or nothing. You have to win the SEC or nothing to make the playoff. You get no grace if you lose to Alabama on a last-second field goal in Atlanta first Saturday in December, because that's your second loss, right? So right now, I'm kind of concerned about Georgia the most because of how important I think that first game is for them, and they're looking at right now maybe 3 starters that aren't going to play in that game.
So if you put the Clemson situation in another conference, if Clemson competing in another conference, I'd be full on board with that injury situation.
But what happens if the concussion protocol happens late first quarter against North Carolina for the ACC championship? You know what I mean?
Sure.
What happens if DJ turns an ankle, can't give it a go? I mean, that's the danger of. You and I talked about this the last time I was on. I don't think we will ever again see a quarterback room like what Ohio State has in training camp right now. I don't think. First of all, I don't know we've seen it that much anyway. But you're going to be lucky if you've got a backup. That I think what you're going to see more and more programs do is try to get a stud quarterback every other year instead of every year. So that you've got that stud is like Caleb Williams at Oklahoma this year. True freshman. J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. True freshman. Okay with sitting it out. Like, I don't think Quinn Ewers, as long as he gets his NIL money, I think he's okay sitting this year. I bet you Kyle McCord and Jack Miller aren't that happy with it, though. Okay. But you get that guy every other year so that you've got a dependable backup quarterback for a year, right? I think you're going to see more teams try to pull that off because getting one of these guys every single year, even if you sign them, keeping them more than 1 year, they're gone right away. They can instantly play somewhere else. I think it's going to be very difficult to build depth at the quarterback position for top programs moving forward.
Now, getting back to the Georgia situation, you have stated this, I believe, as I have, that it's only a matter of time that we're going to see a 2-loss team, depending on when the 12-team proposal is implemented, that we're going to see a 2-loss team in the playoff. And, of course, we're looking at the SEC to supply that. So that would be a Georgia situation right there.
People forget, had Auburn beaten Georgia, in the SEC championship game in 2017, we would have had a 2-loss team that year because Auburn went into that game. That was the Kerryon Johnson team. They went into that game number 2 in the playoff. People forget that. So people instantly just write it off that we'll never see a 2-loss team in the 4-team format. Well, we darn nearly saw it early in the 2-team format. I just think with the likelihood, though, that Oklahoma, Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama aren't losing 2 games, that it makes it very difficult for Georgia to get in with 2 losses.
We appreciate all the comments coming in. Thank you so much for those and the kind comments for Steve.
I saw a couple. Let's answer some of these if you don't mind. Let's answer a few.
Yeah, so what we've got right here, and I will lead into this question by stating that Steve's got his picks available on Patreon. So check out Michigan Podcast on Patreon. You'll get a full description of everything that you can find on the Michigan Podcast page there on Patreon. And Steve's going to supply us with some picks. We've got about 15 media members that are going to be supplying us with picks, including myself. I used to think, Steve, that my picks were good enough, but now I'm soliciting others' predictions.
I've seen your picks the last couple of years. They're good enough.
To try to build up the Patreon. They don't believe me, even though they're all time-stamped. They're all there for everyone to see. Okay, so here's an early one. Of course, week 0 at Champaign, Brett Bielema's debut. The Illini, he's got -6 on the Nebraska side. I've seen a full touchdown. I don't know what the latest line that you saw, but what's your thoughts on this one?
I've liked Illinois all along. I before even the current situation, which smells to me like an administration with a new AD setting its ducks in a row if this thing goes south. To get out of a buyout or at least negotiate a nuts crazy buyout down. This looks to me like a better produced level of palace intrigue than what like Tennessee is capable of when they try it, for example. But that being said, Illinois has more super seniors returning, I think, than any team in the power conferences. You've got a team where a lot of these guys were on this squad that went to a bowl game just 2 years ago. They will not be intimidated by Nebraska at all. They went into Lincoln last year and named the score on these guys. Brandon Peters, I think, is a better college quarterback than Adrian Martinez. I think Adrian Martinez is a more talented football player. But I think Brandon Peters knows how to play winning football, play within a system and himself. Nebraska also has no backup quarterback whatsoever. Similar situation we've addressed already. So, and I think you look at Brett Bielema, I just think he's a better football coach than Scott Frost. I said from the very beginning, Scott Frost, looking at the way that first season he turned on his players, his coaches, it reminded me of Rich Rodriguez at Michigan. He lost a game early on against Notre Dame his first year and said, Michigan football will be back. We were like, where'd we go? We didn't realize we left. Okay. And I think it's very similar to the Rodriguez scenario at Michigan. The difference is he's a favorite son. Otherwise, I think he'd be gone right now already. So I think Brett Bielema, we forget how good of a college football coach this guy was, particularly here in the Big Ten. But he didn't do that bad of a job at Arkansas either, man. All right. His system of trying to play physical in that league, not easy, but they were competitive. And in the postseason, most of the years he was there playing in the toughest division in college football. So I think they have a better head coach. I think they have a better quarterback. I think they have a more stable program, even with a coaching change, and they're at home. So I like Illinois straight up. In fact, that was factored into my record predictions for my Big Ten selections. And if you'll recall, one of my picks for win totals this year, one of my best bets is Illinois over 3.
Yeah, I remember all that. Brett Bielema took over a horrible program and horrible situation at Arkansas.
Yeah.
And they were getting better year by year by year. Up the totem pole, 6 wins, 7 wins, 8 wins. Then he ran into one bad season where he went 4-8. It came unraveled, and there was just no leniency there for that, tolerance, and they sent him out the door, and then they would have wanted him back, of course, 3 years later because Chad Morris couldn't win a game in the SEC.
They did the same thing at Arkansas 40 years ago to Lou Holtz. Top 10, 6-5, fired. I mean, they did the same thing to Lou Holtz. I mean, go look at Lou Holtz's record at Arkansas. That's what it was. Top 10, 6-5, fired. They did the same thing to him there.
So I'm going to rephrase Yakov's question here. One more note on Illinois, Nebraska. I'll just point this out as well. This is pretty alarming for Nebraska football. Offensively, bottom 10 in the nation in turnover rate, meaning they're turning the ball over offensively. And number 2, bottom 10 in the nation in explosive rate. So they're not creating explosive plays, plus they're turning the ball over. And then on defense, they're bottom 10 in getting turnovers this past season. So if you're giving the football up and you can't take it away from the other guy and you've got no big plays, you're only going to win so many 3 and 4 yard plays at the line of scrimmage. That actually leads me to believe that they played well at the line of scrimmage. They won most of the plays, but they didn't win the big plays that determine football games. But Yakov is basically saying, I'll rephrase it here. I think it's more in the realm of, Steve, is the Michigan administration committed to winning?
Yes, but you have to understand that Michigan, they define winning differently than some other places. Championships are vitally important at Michigan. You look at, they have a state-of-the-art stadium, maybe the most venerable in the country. They have state-of-the-art facilities everywhere you go. They spare no expense except when it comes to doing certain things that move beyond a strict student athlete definition. I'll put it that way. And I'm not even necessarily talking about like NCAA violations and stuff. I love what Andy Staples said the other day about the NCAA at this point only exists to help programs get out of buyouts with for cause firings. Okay, no one cares about NCAA rules. No one does. And now with NIL, to me, the only place in all of human history that it was considered immoral to pay the bills of someone less fortunate than you was NCAA rules. I don't know of any other context in all of human history where if somebody of wealth and privilege decided, you know what, this single mom raising all these kids, I'm going to pay her mortgage for her, that we would look on that person as evil, wicked, and despicable. Outside of NCAA rules, I don't know of any other context in all of human history where that was the case. Okay, and by the way, these guys are kind of risking something, spinal cords, brains. They're kind of risking something or two by playing this game we love every Saturday, right? But none of that matters now with NIL because it's all above the table now, all right? Michigan has an alumni base, and frankly, so does Penn State and Ohio State. That makes whatever Bubba the Love Sponge has been paying under the table down in the SEC all these years. It ain't nothing compared to the alumni body that a Michigan brings to the table. We got multiple major league sports owners in our ownership stable, multiple billionaires. It's nothing compared to what we can bring to the table. And now we can do it all above the board. And the administration is like, well, I don't know. Do we want to let him use the Block M? There is a definite level of nauseating self-righteousness within the hallowed halls of the University of Michigan administration. If other schools' administrations look for how they can get away with cutting corners to win, at Michigan, they will pride themselves on making it harder on themselves to win, just so that if they then beat you that way, it feels even better because now we're morally superior too. Okay. Now, having not gone to Michigan, but just grown up a Walmart Wolverine my whole life, I don't give a running turd about any of that crap. Okay. Michigan, I didn't get enough score on my ACT to get into Michigan. So I don't care. I want to win. And to me, I think there ought to be really 2 rules for college athletes and only 2. Number 1, don't be a menace to society in the campus population. 0 tolerance policy. If you are, you don't ever come back. You made yourself a menace once. That's a you problem. No second chances because you were told that's just not permitted. That's like driving the Autobahn in Germany. You can drive whatever speed limit you want, but if you ever get pulled over inebriated, you don't ever drive again. Okay. Secondly, you cannot compromise the academic mission of the university, meaning that we don't offer you as a student a chance to cheat that isn't available to the rest of the student body. Okay. Short of those two things, I don't care if guys are taking classes virtually or I don't care. I don't care if Terrell Pryor got some tattoos and Maurice Claret got a car. I don't care, really. I don't care. And I don't know why anyone else really would. Okay. So, and now that this is above board, then, for Michigan to not be trying to exploit this with every fiber of its being, and it's not, that just reeks of an institutional level bias. Michigan is a lot like a political party. All political parties want to win every election, Mark, but often they want to not do what it takes to win. They want to win their way, if you know what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And within that methodology, they will do whatever it takes to win. But they want to win a certain way, and that's Michigan. Michigan wants to desperately win, but it wants to win a certain way.
I believe, Steve, you've answered the next question from web security here in your initial response there, but he's asking if Michigan wanted you as school president to clean up the mess top down, would you at least take the phone call?
In 5 seconds. Yeah. And then I'm getting off the phone and I'm getting Fred Wilbon and Stephen Ross and all these billionaires in our stable. I'm getting them all on a call. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to laugh about Florida State players getting $500 in Bitcoin. And then we're going to piss ourselves laughing so hard about Miami players getting $500 a month to pimp a gym. Okay. And then we are going to fire a friggin' money cannon in a printing press that's even going to make the boys down in Columbus go, damn, you guys have no shame. That's what I would do. Okay.
And that has not been the Michigan way.
Nope.
So that would be.
Nope, it is not. No, it is not.
A reversal.
There's another question there that I want to answer that came up earlier with the comparison of Brian Kelly. Can I do that?
Absolutely. I missed it.
It was a question where someone says, hey, Brian Kelly did what Jim Harbaugh is attempting to do. And he did. Now, there's a reason why people keep going to the Brian Kelly example of how this can be successful, because it's like the only example. All right. Bob Stoops kind of reinvented his coaching staff when he brought Lincoln Riley in, but his program was already great. It just got greater. But Brian Kelly had that 4-8 season in 2016. There was a lot of talk about, is he going to be around? He's alienated a lot of people. He's not Mr. Likability. He reinvented everything. Coordinators, recruiting staff, same as what Harbaugh has done. And now, ever since he's gone, he's the first Notre Dame coach ever to have 4 straight double-digit win seasons. That's never happened in the illustrious history of Notre Dame. So Brian Kelly is the example that Michigan is trying to emulate with Harbaugh. They're hoping that works. So do I. But Mark, you and I know as guys that have been fans and covered the sport for a long time, most of the time, in fact, the vast majority of the time, after you reshuffle your coaching staff, what more than likely happens more often than not the very next season? The head coach is gone. Okay. It almost never, ever works as a eureka, as a lifeline. Now, maybe it'll work here. Michigan and Notre Dame, even though one's public and one's private, there's a lot of similarities in terms of how their administrations and operate, and their fans and alumni think of themselves and the culture of the two football programs. I mean, Michigan literally taught Notre Dame how to play football. Newt Rockne based the Notre Dame Stadium off of the bowl that Fielding Yost, the hole that he dug there in Ann Arbor. So there's been a lot of cross-pollination between the two schools for a long, long time. So I hope it does work for Jim the way that it worked for Brian Kelly, but you just have to recognize the history is more often than not, when the coach makes huge coaching changes on the staff, the next thing that happens the next season is the head coach is then changed on the staff.
Yeah, there are obvious issues to begin with. And if the head coach is not getting it done with his first selections for a coaching staff or what he inherited, some combination of both, then generally he's not good enough to get it done anyway. But it did work in that case. 4-8 at Notre Dame, of course, in 2016, and they've been much better since. Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. Most of you seem as though you're very aware, but in case you're not, Michigan podcast, any audio platform, are right here on YouTube, and check out his Patreon for his weekly college football predictions. Speaking of coaches, and I'll just tie this into where we've been headed with kind of prognostications for the season, trends, and so forth, is on that fault line of it going either way north or way south in regards to winning. For me, is LSU and Florida. And Dan Mullen, what do you make of him as a head coach? Would you want him coaching your football program?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely a top 10 coach or thereabouts. He might be 9th, he might be 11th, but I mean, I certainly think he's a top 10 coach. He's going to be the answer to a trivia question for the rest of our lives. Name the first team ever ranked number 1 in the history of the college football playoff rankings, and it was the Dak Prescott-led, coached by Dan Mullen, Mississippi State Bulldogs. They were the first ever number 1 team in the history of the college football playoff, okay? I don't think he's a dynamic recruiter. At least not in the level of the cutthroat level that is required down there. But part of that could also be the university he's at. The University of Florida, I believe, is an AAU school. It's also a very respected academic institution. And even though it's SEC, I think it probably is one of the least SEC public universities down there, if you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, so maybe that's necessarily why he's not considered the most dynamic recruiter. There's maybe some things Florida's not willing to kind of do that some other schools down there are. I think at a place like a Penn State or a Michigan or a USC that more recruits itself, and a lot of that talent is within your own backyard, and there's not nearly as many competitors for it as you have at Florida. I think that he would be a perennial national champion type of head coach.
Yeah, he certainly is the offensive football intellect. He has proven that time and time again, and he can both game plan and develop the offensive players, most notably the quarterback, to make it happen. Some of the stunts that he pulled last year and the way he handled the Cotton Bowl kind of turned me off. Oh,
yeah, the game doesn't matter, and because he's going to get killed. What do you expect him to say?
Yeah, but you do what Mac Brown did. Mac Brown's without his 2 best running backs, the 2,000-yard receivers, his best defensive player, and you just show up and you play, and then everybody understands when you lose by a touchdown or so that, and actually gives you credit. People were giving North Carolina credit. Man, they took one of the top 5 teams in the country to a really good game in the last 5 minutes, and actually credit you, as opposed to just, giving up and showing that you gave up and didn't prepare and kind of messaged your players that so they didn't show up mentally either. So that was, and I just think he acts like a clown. I would not want him leading my program, but I think he's a really good head coach. I ranked him ahead of Kirby Smart a couple years ago and was lambasted for that. I bring up LSU as well. I believe you have stated that they're either a boom or bust, just tremendous talent, but of course they've got their dysfunction off the field and related to the program off the field. Ed Orgeron, to me, seems like this guy. He's a different version of Les Miles. I'm not talking about morally. We shall see there of what his judgment has been. But in regards to a guy he's not necessarily the guy that's, breaking down the schemes and making it work from that standpoint. He's the anti-Dan Mullen from a football technician standpoint. Not that he doesn't know the game, but he's not brilliant in any such way. He's just the big personality guy that his players will run through the proverbial brick wall for. He can recruit, therefore they love him, and he's got all the money and facilities in the world at his disposal. Therefore, he's going to win 9-3 most of the time without there being any issue. But I don't necessarily think he's the guy that won the national championship 2 years ago.
I mean, he's at a top 3 or 4 job in the country. Maybe you lose a kid or two to Alabama, and then you get your pick of the litter in one of the top 3-4 most talented high school states for prospects in the sport. It's tough to fail there, and you can have a coach that is that kind of a Les Miles level of a citizen. Now, Les Miles was a tremendous offensive line coach, just as Ed Orgeron was a tremendous defensive line coach. Neither one of them, though, were necessarily considered great tacticians. But you can win there with a phenomenal personality that attracts talent and motivates players, provided the precision is added by the coaching staff. And that's why you saw when things went south with Bo Pelini last year, they really went south. There was never going to be a time where Ed Orgeron was like, hey, I'll take the defense from here. Okay. So now they've got brand new coordinators there at LSU that have never coordinated before. In a strange way, and I hate to say this for the young man, you don't root for him to get hurt, obviously. But if I was an LSU fan, hold on a second. Go lay down. It's my dog. If I was an LSU fan, he's bothering me for a treat. If I was an LSU fan, I might be a little relieved at the quarterback injury, because I think I was headed to a very difficult decision, and I'm not sure I have that kind of head coach that manages those kinds of things, if you know what I'm trying to say, you know? And now the decision's kind of made, and it's all in Johnson's hands. It's, you know, Max, this is your club. Rally around the quarterback. You know, you're our guy. That there won't be any division where that stuff is concerned. I will tell you, I am the most fascinating line in week 1 to me is LSU only laying 4 at UCLA. Because I got to tell you, man, I guess I'll go ahead and agree that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a better quarterback than Max Johnson right now. Just because he's played more. Tell me what other position, though. But do you think that it's so dramatic of a difference that the talent gap at the other 21 positions that LSU is going to present? Like, do you think basically by only making LSU a 4-point favorite, you're telling me that you think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is like the all Pac-12 quarterback for this year? And so he's like a touchdown difference of a player. Do you think that? I don't. You know?
No, he's not that good. He's a top 25 quarterback in the nation.
Okay.
I think this is Vegas telling us that they expect LSU to do every dumb thing imaginable to keep UCLA close.
Yes, they are. That tells me they're just like begging people to line up and take LSU. Like they just are. That just tells me they are smelling an ambush or some form of a backdoor cover that Orgeron just, gives up a stupid touchdown or something at the end of the game that LSU kind of controls, and it goes from 38-28 to 38-35 or something like that, okay? Because that spread to me, I would have, and I think I'm like maybe higher on UCLA than most teams are, most people are. If you look at my team total talent ratings, for example, okay? But I don't know how in the world that LSU is only a 4-point favorite in that game. I don't think the advantage they have in experience at quarterback makes up for the talent disadvantage at the other 21 positions on the field. That just tells you they're just fading the new coaching staff and Ed Orgeron, and they're just begging you to look at that and say, that's just too easy. LSU's so much more talented. Okay.
And the public
that's a befuddling number to me.
And it appears as though the public has done exactly what you've said, because I think it's been bet up from 3 or 3.5 to 4.
There you
go. Because that hit me in the face too, right out of the gate. I'm like, I can't get to my laptop fast enough to put money on LSU.
This is a good question about Luke Fickell. Can I answer this one?
Absolutely. One of the worst jobs in history of spelling the name Fickell, but there's the question about Luke Fickell going to Michigan.
So, first of all, I think Michigan dodged a big bullet when he didn't go to Michigan State a couple of years ago. But I would be very concerned, and I've said this publicly, I'll say it again here. If I'm Michigan, I'm not even trying that. You're talking about, this isn't Bo, who played at Miami of Ohio for Woody. Yeah, he was Woody's offensive coordinator at Ohio State, but he was not a Buckeye. Fickell is full-fledged Buckeye all the way. And if I were Michigan, I'd be very, very concerned because he's got an out. Because this is exactly what happened with Michigan State. Looked like he was going to take the job, then at the last minute, left him kind of hanging and didn't. If I were Michigan, I'd be very concerned about Luke Fickell playing you. Oh, yeah, I'm interested. Then let, a couple, 2, 3 other candidates that are mentioned for the job go take other jobs and then come back and say, oh, snap, guys. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. Especially the new 12-team playoff. I got an easier path to the playoff here. I would not put my fate in the hands of someone as buck-nutted through and through as Luke Fickell is. I just think he's a fine football coach. What he's done there, of course, is phenomenal. I don't know that it's that much different than what Brian Kelly did there. People forget Mark D'Antonio was really good there. Tommy Tuberville was pretty good there. Okay, this is one of the better group of 5 jobs in the sport. Now he's done a phenomenal job, no doubt about it. But I don't look at him and say he's so good that I'll risk the chance he'll scorch earth me, he'll Buckeye sabotage me. So I'll sit around and let him decide on this for 3 or 4 days while I'm losing out for other candidates. I would not do that if I were Michigan. I would not even go to him. If I'd make him come to me, and then it's a take it or leave it offer right then and there. I would not finagle with him or anything on any way, shape, or form. Can you imagine the amount? And then 4 or 5 years from now, Ryan Day takes an NFL job. Luke Fickell comes back to Columbus, man, names his price. He's the greatest folk hero in Columbus history, man. No, I'm not. If I'm Michigan, I am not giving Luke Fickell the opportunity to do that to me.
About 150 on the line, and most of you have missed most of the conversation, so wait for the video to post and then go grab it and watch the rest. Steve, just want to make sure I'm respecting your time. How much time do you got? I'll keep you here all day talking college football.
I'm more concerned about when everybody gets home so it gets loud. So let's do a lightning round here, 15 more minutes.
Well, this is what I want to make sure that I get out of you. Reasonable chaos. I believe that you're rooting for it just like I am. Now, we could come up with all sorts of crazy scenarios, but give me a reasonable scenario that's a strong possibility that you want to see play out to really make the college football playoff selection committee squirm.
We're long, in terms of just data and trends, we're way overdue for one of these major programs to get upset in a conference championship game. Like what we used to see more frequently in the BCS era, okay? We've not really seen that. It's happened in the Pac-12 where we thought Oregon was probably in, or was it Utah that was probably Utah that we thought was probably in, and they lost to Oregon. But not having Utah in the playoff, by the way, Utah is a team, I got them to win the Pac-12 at 15-1. I like Utah a lot. But if Utah doesn't make the playoff, it's not like, oh no, man, it's crazy. You're not going to work the next day, in North Carolina, at the office there in Charlotte. Guys, can you believe Utah blew that game and didn't make the playoff? You won't do that like you would if it was Ohio State, Clemson, or Alabama. And what I think we're way overdue for is for one or two of those teams to lose a conference championship game that at the very end throws this thing into quite a bit of chaos. And I think this could be the year for it. You're looking, all three of those programs are breaking in new quarterbacks. Ohio State is coming off the worst scoring defense in the history of the freaking program last year. All right. So they've got some issues over there. You look at Alabama's got a team that I think is actually, when everybody's healthy, more overall talented in Georgia, but we were talking about them with the injuries. Right, for Clemson, say they're healthy at the end of the year against Alabama. Remember, Alabama has beaten Georgia twice now in the SEC championship game, but led for like a total of 1 minute in both of those games, okay? So, the situation with, say you get Clemson in North Carolina or Clemson in Miami in an ACC championship game, and Sam Howell and Derek King, if you've got a concussion protocol, those are good enough quarterbacks to put up 30 points or something and pull an upset. I think that's the scenario that we are way overdue for, is the conference championship game, the Texas over Nebraska, Texas A&M over Kansas State over Oklahoma. We're way overdue for the conference championship game upset or two that throws absolutely everything for a loop. We haven't had that really in the playoff era, and I think we're overdue for that.
The way I've transitioned looking at Texas and Oklahoma football performance in recent years and where they stand right now, obviously Texas is a little bit more unpredictable with the new head coach. Tried to move that into an SEC model to see, where they would stand. To me, let's look at Texas. They basically since Mac Brown stepped off the field have been like a 7-5 program.
They average 7
their winning percentage, yes. And just size that down to one season, they're 7-5. And so they're going 5-4, max 6-3 in the Big 12. Well, they got a couple gimmies, and then they got basically no one that they can't beat. They've even taken Oklahoma to a one-score game every year for almost a decade. And then suddenly they've got a bunch of teams that they've got like a 70-30 advantage on, a lot of TCUs and Oklahoma States out there.
And they can't beat them regularly. Yes.
You transition that into the SEC, and sure, SEC fans, I'm sure you've heard these comments. They'll hit me with, well, Oklahoma and Texas are going to have to play. Well, they're not going to have to play all those teams every year.
No, but they're going to play.
They're going to play 2/3 to 3/4
because of TV. Because of TV, they're going to play Alabama, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma at a minimum every single year. At a minimum. They will play those three teams every single year at a minimum.
So to my point, if Sark's not the man, if he's not better than Tom Herman and Charlie Strong, a lot better, then man, they're in for.
I don't get this Sark thing. I wasn't impressed at USC.
I wasn't either.
I wasn't impressed at Washington. He was okay there. I don't know what the upgrade is over Tom
Herman.
Tom Herman, thank you. I mean, they were a top 25 team last year. Okay, they finished 7-3 and in the top 25. Wasn't like they were terrible.
They took Oklahoma to overtime. They lost to Iowa State on a last-second field goal. They were that close.
Yeah. I get. Listen, I'm not a guy that thinks as a program you cannot aim higher. I really resent it when people say, "Well, that's the best you can do." Screw you, dude. Up yours. All right, that's beyond patronizing. Particularly if your name is Texas. Like, I don't blame Texas for wanting to do better than Tom Herman at all. I don't understand why you think Steve Sarkisian is. That's what I don't get. Like, I was totally down with openly courting Urban Meyer right out in the open in Tom Herman's face. That makes perfect sense, man. I mean, I totally get why when Kate Upton is single, you're going to make sure she's good. You're going to make her say no. I totally understand that. All right. I just don't understand why you think Steve Sarkisian is Kate Upton, because he's not. I don't get that at all.
Our guy, Falcon Rex, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate that. He's always supporting us here. Steve Deace will spit the truth in your face. You may not like it, but that's a you problem.
Nice. Very nice.
Good stuff, Falcon Rex. Appreciate that so much. The Oklahoma Dream season would be not only to win a national championship, but beat an SEC team or two on the way to doing it. On the flip side, of course, the SEC homers are basically saying, you can't play in our conference. You're going to be 8-4 in our conference. So it's going to be fascinating to see if Oklahoma's actually upgraded to the point where they can play defense, not against TCU and Oklahoma State. Yes, they've upgraded the defense under Alex Grinch to not be horrible, but can they play? You know, we're not expecting them to shut down a Joe Burrow or Matt.
Here's the bottom line of this,
offense, but hold them
in this arrangement, Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M are not all going to be really good at the same time. They just can't be, because all three of them are going to make the exact same recruiting pitch to the same region of recruits. So it's math, man. You know, in real life, I'm not a Keynesian when it comes to my economics. In football recruiting, I'm as zero-sum game as you can get, because you're talking about a scarce resource. There's only so many players. Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas A&M need to dominate the exact same region of the country with the exact same pitch. And I don't think all three can be successful at the level that they anticipate and want to be simultaneously. One of them will take a step back, I believe.
Somebody asked in here, I've lost track of it since, but what is Jim Harbaugh's biggest win?
You could say, he's pulled one technical upset at Michigan. A few sports books had him a 1-point underdog against Notre Dame, that game in the deluge, when Notre Dame was in the top 10. So that was his one kind of upset. Probably his most impressive win would have been Penn State, 49-10, when they won the 2016 Big Ten championship. finally getting the win against a ranked team against Michigan State that year on the road is considered one of his better wins. I would say those 3 wins in a row in 2018, the so-called revenge tour, they beat 3 ranked teams in a row, all of them by double digits, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Penn State. That's his best stretch as a coach. I think all those teams were, I think Wisconsin and Penn State were like 12th to 15th, and Michigan State was kind of on the tail end of the top 25. The Notre Dame game in 2019 would be amongst his best wins. The Citrus Bowl against Florida would be amongst his best wins. And Penn State in 2016, I would say that's probably on the list of his best wins.
Steve, one day when I get to the pearly gates, when there will be much weightier matters to bother the man upstairs with, I'll be asking things like, did the Packers and Vince Lombardi really fix the heating grid to not work before the 67 Ice Bowl? Did Franco Harris actually catch the Immaculate Reception? And I'll ask, did JT Barrett make it on 4th down? And regardless of that answer, if the officials would have determined and measured that otherwise, what would have happened at Michigan after that?
Well, I'm not really big on that play because I think if the situation was reversed and it went to a review and it was that close in our stadium, those refs ain't getting out alive, not calling that a first down in either location. The rest of that game, and Mark, you've known me now for several years, okay? Even chatting privately. How many times you ever heard me like blame the refs? We got screwed. You ever hear that crap from me? Never.
No.
The only time I really believe that officials cost us a game was that game in 2016. And it was beyond egregious. I mean, I've got a photo on my computer of the referee smiling at Curtis Samuel as he scores the game-winning touchdown there. And I'm like, I wish my wife would look at me the way that back judge is looking at Curtis Samuel. Mike Weber getting pats on his ass from referees. The fact that we had 8 sacks in that game. Do you remember this? We had 8 sacks in this game. Do you know how many times Ohio State was called for holding, Mark?
Once.
0. No holding calls for 8 sacks. I mean, amazing. It's amazeballs. The whole rest of the game, Ohio State's pass blocking was just perfectly on point, except for the 8 times Michigan actually got home. I mean, that's just, tomato. That game from an officiating standpoint, I thought was a travesty. And if Michigan had won it, then I think it's 2016 is for Jim Harbaugh what 2017 was for Kirby Smart. Everything I think takes off from there. Okay, similar to, remember when Rich Rodriguez got the Michigan job and the first person he called was Terrell Pryor? Remember that? Okay, if Rich Rod gets Terrell Pryor in here right away to run that offense, what history gets? First of all, what if Rich Rod goes through with taking that Alabama job the year before? Okay. What if Wayne Huizenga had listened to Nick Saban and traded for Drew Brees when he was coaching the Dolphins? These are some things that what if Greg Schiano, who originally said yes to Michigan and then slept on it and then said the next day he couldn't leave Rutgers, he couldn't do it. What if he had said yes? There's a lot of these kinds of what if moments that totally change the trajectory of recent college football history. And and one of them is the West Virginia-Pittsburgh game in 2007. And West Virginia is a 3-touchdown favorite. They just need to beat Pitt, and they're in the BCS National Championship game, and they lose at home to Pitt straight up. And that allows LSU with 2 losses to sneak into the BCS Championship game. If Rich Rod wins that game, Michigan ends up hiring Les Miles that week. And who knows what ends up happening to Rich Rod then. Maybe he never leaves West Virginia since he took him to the national championship game. Those are the little things that could have changed a lot, but there's no question that if Michigan had won that day in Columbus, we would not be having the conversations right now about Jim Harbaugh that we are having.
So when you see things like you saw in 2016 in Columbus concerning the officials, do you think incompetency or do you think there's something bigger going on here that's nefarious?
If I didn't work full-time in politics, I would probably just chalk it up to incompetency. But I do. So when it's that egregiously bad. And Michigan, by the way, didn't help itself. Michigan had a screenplay in that game, remember, that looked like it was pretty much going to ice the game. And, our most experienced offensive lineman, who ended up starting 50 games, gets called for holding like 30 yards downfield. And it was a good call, okay? So, it wasn't like Michigan played this pristine game. Harbaugh called a terrible play call, having Wilton Spate with half a shoulder throw from the end zone on an obvious passing situation, and it gets picked off. And I think that was Ohio State's only touchdown in regulation, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it wasn't like Michigan did not contribute to that effort, but that is the one time as a fan that I absolutely believe that the referees screwed us, for sure. What their motivations were, I don't know. I'll let higher powers than me who can gauge such things determine that.
Well, as a Buckeye fan, I didn't see all of the poor officiating that you saw. I just know that Ohio State could not move the ball for 3.5 quarters, and they somehow eked out a drive in the final, half a quarter.
It's a maze ball. It's a defensive line y'all couldn't block for 4 hours. That Curtis Samuel was able to run all the way to the right and run all the way to the left. Nobody held. Nobody blocked in the back. Wow. Tip of the cap. Phenomenal.
That's tracking that back and being able to, that's tremendous discipline out
Indeed.
of Urban Meyer's crew.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Forever 7-0 against Michigan. What he'll be against the Tennessee Titans, I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah.
That's somewhat fascinating to see. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody told me that in 5 years Urban Meyer's going to have multiple playoff teams, or that he's going to have a string of 3-13 seasons and he's done and he's out the door. I don't know what to make of that.
You'll get a definitive verdict because he walked into the perfect situation. He drafted the next Andrew Luck, and he had $80 million to spend under the salary cap. So if he can't make this work, and this might be the second weakest division in the NFL next to the NFC North. So if he can't make this work, then he just wasn't going to be an NFL coach.
I understand loyalty and allegiances, but what is the upside to bringing in Tim Tebow versus
the enormous
downside?
What's the downside to finding out if maybe the best college football player of all time can still play football? I don't. If he can't, you cut him. I don't understand why this was, other than the politics of it because of his faith. I really don't understand the controversy around this. I mean, so a guy I coached before, that's a large reason why I'm getting the paydays I'm getting now. And made it to the AAA level of baseball. Why not find out if arguably the greatest college football player walking the earth, let's find out if he has any juice in the tank. I don't. Okay. Why is that controversial?
You're seeing that completely different than me. I get your point, though. It makes sense. I'm getting it from the standpoint, why create a circus when the best Tim Tebow's going to be is a backup tight end? That's the best he's going to give you. I can't imagine he's going to give you any more than that, but he's going to create a circus. And then if you've got a difficult call to make as to in regards to keeping him on the roster versus not, then you play into that situation of everybody criticizing you and saying you gave him a gift when you maybe legitimately kept him on the roster. I don't see the benefit to any of that. So we did have one last super chat. I wanted to honor that from Scott Sheridan. It was not a question, but a statement. And it's difficult for me to find at this point. But Scott's a big Texas guy. So he says, Sark is bringing in a new culture. The sleeping giant is awakening.
Every coach says they're bringing in a new culture. No coach says, guys, I'm bringing in an old shitty culture. Nobody does that. Okay. No defensive coordinator ever says, we're going read and react. We're going to play slower, and we're going to let the offense set the tempo. No one does that. No one ever failed with a recruiting class. I mean, these are just all tried and true talking points. Okay. And trust me, I'm a Michigan fan. If I'm an expert on anything, it's talking points.
One last thing, Steve, I'll see if you agree with me on this, because it comes to mind with Tim Tebow. It comes to mind with Tom Brady. To me, there's a difference between greatest of all time and most accomplished of all time. And
Fair.
in neither category do I believe that they are the greatest of all time. Of course, Tom Brady is a much better case than Tebow, but the most accomplished of all time, certainly Brady fits that bill, and Tebow's in the running.
I think that's a fair distinction. Yeah.
Steve Deace, Michigan podcast. Everybody enjoyed this conversation. There's no question about that. Appreciate everybody being here. And Steve, your appearances on my channel are always a highlight. So you know that you're always welcome.
Thanks, brother. Good to see you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yep.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. And let's see, what do we got next? We've got 7 o'clock with Miami Live. 7 o'clock Miami Live, and we will see all of you there on the Miami channel with Cam Underwood from State of the U. If you missed part of the conversation, it was a good one from start to finish. So please wait for the video to post and then catch Steve and his comments on college football as we ran it down, starting with his beloved Michigan Wolverines. Great to see everybody here. Want to make sure I caught up with all the super chats. The last one coming in from Falconer X. Thank you so much. We are going to run the wishbone. Why wouldn't somebody run the wishbone? I would love to see that. The thing that annoys me, for all the people that feel as though the triple option is outdated, and yes, it is. It's not effective if you've got athletes. I understand that. But I like to see variety. I would love to see some different offenses in college football. I actually enjoy watching the triple option because nobody's running it except for the service academies. So I like to check in with a great triple option attack like Army, Navy, and Air Force because everybody else is basically doing the same thing. Yeah. So that's just me. I would love to see a little triple option, love to see a little wishbone, the veer. I'd love to see pro style come back. I'd like to see like the LSUs and the Wisconsins come back with a little more pro style. They're going to the spread and doing the same RPO garbage that everybody else is doing. Again, it's proven effective. Recruit or draft a mobile quarterback, and then he becomes a threat to the defense, and therefore the defense has to defend 11 versus 10. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. It just, as a football fan, becomes boring when everybody's running the same offense. All right, great to see all of you. See you at 7 o'clock, Miami Live, and we will see you then.